Hi, Nick Dogan, North State Law. We safeguard your professional license so you can get back to business. Today's topic is the five most common types of people that file complaints with the North Carolina Licensing Board for General Contractors. I've been doing this since about 2017. This area of law opened my firm in 2019. And I've seen a good bit of general contractor licensing cases over the years. These are the five most common types of people that I've seen file complaints. Obviously, it's not an exhaustive list because anybody can file a complaint against a general contractor in North Carolina. But where I've seen the complaints come from are this 1 through 5, with one being somebody from the planning and permitting department, and that could be an inspector, that could be a clerk, that could be a clerk pulling or wanting to issue a permit or checking a permit or something along those lines. Those are the types of people that I've seen most commonly file a complaint with the GC board in North Carolina. And I think if I looked at the numbers, the numbers overall might be a little bit different. But again, this list is just like what I've seen over the years. So number two is not going to be a surprise. The only surprise about number two is that it's not number one, and it's a close number two, and that is the customers or former customers. That's pretty elementary. Somebody has a problem with how a job was done. The first thing they'll do, other than maybe seeking a civil action, is to file a complaint with the GC board. Customers or former customers file complaints for different reasons, and they might have a legit gripe. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes a mistake's made, and general contractor's not given an opportunity to correct it, and they go straight to the GC board. Other times, you might get somebody that does a really poor job. They don't want to correct anything, and the customer or former customer has every reason and is in the right on going to the GC board. But you got other times, and a lot of other times, it boils down to money, right? Hey, you said that you would, fix this. All right. Well, you go back and you fix something else that might be a little bit out of the scope of your contract with them, or might be beyond what a change order said. Well, then they're going to push the envelope a little bit more, right? They're going to say, all right, well, this person did this, and they want, say it was a $120,000 contract to remodel a bathroom. Well, then, oh, well, would you guys mind just like moving that wall a little bit more to create a little bit more space? It's like, well, that's not in the contract. That's not what the plans call for, and that wasn't part of any change order. Well, what do you mean you're not going to do that? Well, and also that would put us massively over budget, and you already owe us like 35 grand. Oh, wow, I'm not paying that. That's ridiculous. And then a complaint's filed, right? That happens a good bit. That happens probably more than people would really like to admit. And one of the things that I've learned out over the years with people just in general, having been in service-based industries before, sales-based industries before, like things like that, some people you just can't please. They want a problem to occur so they can have in their minds an excuse not to pay you. So what I kind of learned, when I opened my own practice in 2019 was, you know, people that I've seen when I was working for somebody else or just talking with friends of mine that own businesses, like, you know, how do we how do we figure out who's going to be a bad customer, a bad client, or just a bad fit personality wise with this, right? So, one of the things that we've implemented is a client grading system. A, B, C, D, and F. Just the old school grades, and it's really helpful in not only kind of figuring out who your ideal customer is, which is extremely important, but also making sure that your staff is aware that we're not going to put up with bad fits for us. We're not going to put up with people that are going to drain our time and cause us nothing but problems and headaches. And so we're just going to avoid them. Maybe they'll be a better fit for somebody else. And if they're not, then it's not our problem. Unfortunately, that's the way things are. So you as a business owner, especially if you're running a general contracting business, you got to kind of figure out like, all right, in the past, these are the type of people that gave me a hard time. And what I mean by types of people, I mean like personalities. I'm not saying discriminate against anybody, under no way, shape, or form would I ever advise that. What I'm saying is, if you talk to people and they say certain things, like, for example, well, you're the fifth general contractor that I've hired to finish this job up. That's a major red flag, right? Huge red flag. Or if you're talking to somebody and the price is the price is the price, and they're like, well, do you think you could come down more? Do you think you can come down more off of that? Or why is this so high? Or why are these materials so expensive? And they're constantly trying to nickel and dime you off of stuff. That's another red flag, right? Those are examples of things that I'm talking about. And you're probably, I'm not a general contractor. I don't know what other red flags would be when it comes to customers or potential customers. I know for my firm, we have certain red flags. One of those is similar to my first example. Well, you're the sixth law firm that I've contacted about this. I've gone through 5 other attorneys before. Yeah, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go with somebody else. That's not a good fit for us. And it's business at the end of the day. You got to take care of yourselves. They'll find somebody else. They found 5 other people. It's not a problem. I've had friends of mine who are attorneys. I've had friends of mine that are in different professions. And that one is kind of across the board as a red flag. Like, you're the X person that I've had take a look at this. That's a pretty good indication that they're not a good client, they're not a good customer, they're just a walking problem, unfortunately. So, the former customers, and at the end of the day, we all know what a lot of problems might arise with customers and former customers, and that's money. And it's going back to my other example, like, hey, I want you guys to do more work at a lower amount than we had talked about. Or I don't want to pay you anymore, even though per the contract, I owe you 35 grand. That's a no go. We can't do stuff like that. And those times where you stand up for yourself and your business and your employees and say, look, we have a contract. I can't go below what the price is. I'm sorry, or I can't do more work without getting adequately compensated for it. And unfortunately, those can turn out to have complaints, and it does happen, and those are typically frivolous complaints. And those usually will get resolved relatively quickly. So it's one of those things, like, if you handle things the right way, you could possibly or probably avoid a complaint, even if you get someone that's being unreasonable, without having to do more work for either no pay or not enough pay, pursuant to what you typically charge people. So, going back to where we're at, we did, number one was people that work for the planning permitting department. Number two is customers, former customers. Number three is going to be former employees. Um, this kind of thing happens sometimes. You get disgruntled employees. They want to make your life difficult. Something happened and they were let go for one reason or another. Maybe they're consistently late for work, or they're taking a 3-hour lunch break and they don't come back, or I got car trouble today. So you got car trouble every day. Something along those lines, and you got to let them go. They turn around and go, well, hey, I thought I saw X, Y, or Z. I'm going to report them to the GC board. And again, it might be a legitimate complaint. It might be an illegitimate complaint, but vetting employees before you hire them is super important. Just like you vet customers before you allow them to hire you. Yeah, I got that right. You want to make sure that you vet your employees before you hire them, because that's your reputation. What they do falls back on you at the end of the day. And if, when you find good employees, you vet them, you ask them open-ended questions in the interview process, instead of saying, like, hey, have you ever had a run-in and an issue with a customer before? Nope, sure haven't. Are you punctual? Yep, absolutely. I never miss work. Ask open-ended questions, something that's going to get them to think, and maybe they make a mistake and are a little bit more honest with you than they would if it was just a quick yes or no. You know what I mean? So, an example of that be like, tell me about the last time that you had a negative interaction with a customer. And if they think about it for too long, it's a could be an indication that there was some issues, and a lot of issues, because they're having to recycle back in their head, like, don't want to talk to them about that, don't want to talk to them about that. Versus if you ask somebody that question and it's a quick no, it's like, think for a second. No, I don't have issues with customers. Or it could be a situation where they say, you know what, I've had customers be rude to me in the past. This is how I typically handle it, and that could be a follow up question. So doing the interview process the right way where you're properly vetting, potential employees can save you a lot of hassle going on down the line, including but not limited to, not having former employees that are not going to sing your praises, that are really going to dislike you and your business and going to speak not only ill of you to other people, but file a complaint with the GC board, for example. So that's a really important thing. So we've got planning department and permitting department employees. Cover that in just one. Former customers, former employees. And then we're going to move into former business partners. And again, relationships matter. That's a common theme that we have. When we see a complaint, the relationships are typically not great. Otherwise, somebody's not going to file a complaint or not likely to file a complaint with the GC board if they have a good relationship with you. That does still happen from time to time, but it's less likely to happen if you have a good relationship with somebody. And that definitely includes former business partners. I had a client that had a relationship. They were doing really good work. They had a business partner. That business partnership wasn't really working for who ended up being my client. The business partner was upset that the business partnership was dissolved, and my client kept going forward with his portion of the business and reformed and things like that, and was going along fine. The other business partner got upset because they were out at that point and filed a frivolous complaint. And thankfully we were able to get it resolved and get it resolved relatively easily. Still took some work, but at the end of the day, we were able to get it resolved with a dismissal. But you know, if you can have and maintain a good relationship with the business partner, then you're going to have a healthy business. You're going to have a profitable business. You're going to have a business that's going to grow, and you're going to decrease the amount of people that are likely to file a GC complaint against you, right? So when you have a business relationship with a partner or just about anybody, but especially a business partner, you want to communicate pretty well. Now, I was never a huge meeting guy until I started to get more and more staff. And even when I started off with one staff member after working by myself for a couple of years, I would still have, a meeting uh, like just once a week, just even if it was just touch base, make sure we were both on the same page. And I'm not saying if you got a good business relationship with somebody that you need to have a meeting every single day. That's kind of a waste of time. And I'm not saying that have a business meeting with no agenda. You definitely want to have an agenda, even if it's like 15-minute check-in. Like, hey, I know we talked about this in the past. Want to circle back around on this and see where we're at with this. Or hey, you got a minute to talk about X, Y, or Z. You do want to be uh, more structured in it, and it could be like, hey, every Monday at 10 o'clock. That's when we do ours. Check-in meetings. Every Monday at 10 o'clock, we're going to check in. We're going to devote at least an hour of our time on our calendar. If it takes 30 minutes, great. If it takes 20 minutes, that's fine. If it takes the full hour, then so be it. And we're going to make sure that we're on the same page. If you have just a business partner and you've got other employees that you have to interact with, you might not need that hour with the business partner every single week, but you're gonna want to have maybe have a 2-hour lunch once a month with your business partner. Just make sure everything's going smooth. Just make sure there's no issues. Typically, my understanding is business partners, everybody has their own side of the business that they run. So you want to make sure that that's done. And if that is the case, and they're running half the business, you're running the other half, you guys are going to probably want to talk, multiple times a month, and have a big meeting, have a couple smaller meetings, things like that. And if you maintain a good business relationship, you guys are profitable, you make money, you keep growing, you're less likely to not only get complaints against who would become a former business partner, but you're likely to get less complaints all the way around, okay? Because you're running a good, profitable business. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's rowing in the same direction, so to speak, and there should be no issues at that point, or small issues that can be resolved easily. So, all right, so that was number 4. Number 5 is going to be neighbors of customers. This is a weird one. Doesn't happen very often, but it does still happen. My dad is a general contractor down in Florida. My brother works with him, and my brother was telling me an example of a neighbor that they were doing a remodel on a property across from the Gulf of Mexico. Neighbor was across the street, didn't like where my brothers and his folks were parking their vehicles. Well, it was on the right of way. And the right of way, you can park the vehicle there because it's public. And that individual was consistently upset and thought that that was his property, even though it wasn't, and consistently complained over the course of a number of hours until, they relented and said, you know what, it's not worth a hassle with anybody filing a complaint. We'll go ahead, look, we'll move these to a different spot. They had to walk another extra 100 yards or something like that. But at the end of the day, if something can be resolved with a neighbor relatively easily and smoothly, and it's not going to result in more time to complete the project or a bigger hassle for you or your subs, then you're probably better off doing it. To be honest with you, because people are weird. They get really weird when it comes to their property or what they perceive as their property, and they may file a complaint, and that one's easy to avoid. Like I said, if they're asking for something that is completely unreasonable, they're being belligerent about it, and things are escalating, you might be in the right calling the police on them. It just really depends. You don't want it to get to that level. I'm not saying drop of the hat, do something like that, but depending on the situation where they're getting aggressive in a physical manner, then yeah, you got to do what you got to do as far as getting law enforcement involved. But if it's something relatively minor where they want you to move a vehicle even though it's not on their property, then okay, and it's not going to cause a delay in the project, sure. I'll use an example. I used to live close to downtown Raleigh. Neighbor to the next to me was redoing their house. They had a large dumpster. Dumpster kept, you know, piling up until trash kept like accumulating in my yard. Nobody lived in there at the time. Found somebody from the property, said, "Hey, I live next door. I'm picking up a lot of trash coming out of your dumpster, man. You guys are supposed to get that cleaned out, weekly. It's been a month. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and nobody's picking it up. Can you take care of that?" "Yeah, sure, no problem, man." Okay, week goes by, nothing. So call the number, don't get a hold of anybody. Try the business again, don't get a hold of anybody. End up calling the permitting department. Now, I'm not usually going to complain about stuff, but trash in my yard's a bugaboo. I don't like that sort of thing. I would never go to a GC board or any other licensing entity, typically, unless it was something super, super egregious. I'm not going to do it for some trash in my yard. But I did call up the permitting department just to try to get somebody's number that had pulled the permit. They were nice enough to provide me that information. It was a different number than what I'd seen on the trash can and on the sign. Called them. Everything was squared away within a day. So that could have been something that could have been better handled by the GC doing the remodel next to my house back in the day. But at the end of the day, it got resolved. And, some people might have taken that a different direction and just filed a complaint, so you got to really be careful who is around. You don't want to be living in fear. I'm not saying anything like that, but, basic stuff where don't piss the neighbors off. Don't be rude to the permitting lady. Don't be mad at the inspector that's doing an inspection. Don't get rude with customers. Don't get rude with former customers. Try to vet and hire the right employees. Like schedule time with former business partner with your business partners so that don't become former business partners. And sometimes things are unavoidable. And if they're unavoidable and somebody files a complaint, feel free to reach out to our office. It's 919-521-8810. You can call or text the number. You get a free 15-minute discovery call. Check out the blogs on my website. It's northstatelawfirm.com. You can also check out the other videos on my YouTube channel. It's North State Law's YouTube channel. You get a lot of good information on there if you got any questions there. And like I said, if you got any other questions, give us a call at the number 919-521-8810 or send us a text. You get a free 15-minute discovery call, like I said, and we can help you out. All right. I hope everybody found that information useful, and I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Keep building North Carolina, y'all. Bye bye.